Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan AGAJAINIan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're taping at the Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue in the heart of Hollywood, and we're in the historic Max Factor building. Our guests are artist Sheku Kowai and poet Kita Shantiris. Artist, activist, Sheku Kowai was born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Sierra Leone. He comes from a long line of educated leaders. He feels the responsibility of his African legacy, and I'm going to let him tell you the story of how he went from D.C., how he got to Sierra Leone. So tell us the story.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here.
It's an honor, and you're a cultural icon. So, how did I get from D.C. to Sierra Leone? My parents slept together.
But you were already born, right?
I was born in the 70s. My mom, went to Hampton, which was an all-Negro college back in the days.
Oh.
My uncle went there, and my uncle was a professor at UC Irvine. And sort of backtrack, I grew up in Sierra Leone, like you said. I grew up in a very privileged, posh
area of it?
Yeah, my grandparents were in politics. And so when I was born, my father was born in North Carolina, and he's a Native American black, and my mother is an African Jewish.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
Well, how did she? Oh, never mind.
Yeah, I don't.
We've got to get to your art
Yeah,
sometime
exactly.
today.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
But interesting.
A can of worm.
And your father didn't feel like...
When I got older, I had an opportunity to sit down with my father about 2 years ago. I was in a motorbike accident. And I go, why did you send me to Africa?
Oh, they didn't go with you?
No. They never went. They
sent you alone?
My grandfather,
Oh.
they handed me, they took me to the airport. Honestly, they took me to the airport and handed me to a stewardess and the crib and the baby thing. And there I went, and my grandmother was waiting for me. Honest to God, John.
That's very interesting because I thought you moved with your family because your father didn't fit in.
I was taken to the airport, which I think will be very traumatized.
Moses.
It will be very traumatized for a young mom, to send away her child.
Exactly.
But they took me to the airport, and handed me off to the stewardess and said, to Sierra Leone. And I'm sure there was... Yeah, exactly. I'm sure there was a name tag on my chest that said, here he comes, to Sierra Leone, he goes.
Oh, so you were actually a baby.
Yeah, I was a child. I mean, I was about 2,
Oh, right.
Yeah, so, and the reason being, the question, how I went from Sierra Leone to Washington.
I see.
The reason being is because my father grew up in a very segregated area in Washington, in Greenville, North Carolina. And he did not want his son to be called that derogatory name.
What was your earliest recollection of the arts? Because you said you were 2 or 3 years old when you got there. What do you remember about the arts?
And again, going back to my father, it came from my father's mouth. When I was being potty trained, I would doodle on the wall.
Doodle, yeah.
And my mother would want to scold me. And she'd go, no. And my father would say, don't scold him. That will stop him from doing whatever he's doing.
So it was destined. You were destined.
Yeah.
Instead of reading on the potty, you were
exactly. Instead of taking a PP, number 1, number 2, I will doodle,
Right. So when did you decide to be an artist? Maybe at that point.
Well, it was, as you say, it was destined. It was always in my blood.
Right.
I spent about 10 years traveling all over Africa. And everywhere I went, people would say, are you an artist? And I would say, no, it's not conducive.
Why? Because of your demeanor? Because of your feelings?
Yeah, the way I would just present, dress, my little Rastafarian, getty up. And I was very confused when I was in college.
And where was college?
University of Minnesota.
Oh, you came back to Minnesota?
Yeah, I dropped out, which was a culture shock. I went from Sierra Leone directly
To
to Minnesota,
Minnesota.
and it was just cold. It's
Was
like,
all white.
oh my God.
White. White.
Cold Scandinavian culture, but very cold. The weather was extremely cold.
Oh.
And you know, I went to college in Minnesota, and I was a smart kid, but I hated to study. I really hated studying, and I just wasted time.
Did they have art classes at that time?
Minnesota had art classes.
Were
but
you taking them?
No, I was never interested.
Oh, you weren't at
No,
that time.
because I think what it was already in my blood to be who I
Right.
am today. And I grew up watching the elders making masks, country cloth, and all this stuff.
In the villages.
Yeah, in the village. And I grew up
Yeah.
in the village called California, believe it or not.
No, I thought that was very funny when
Yeah.
I read that.
Well, it goes
And here
back-
you are in California
Exactly.
finally, right?
Yeah, it's very whimsical,
Yeah.
you know?
But something else it was meant to be.
Yeah.
Because I think from that village you got your feelings,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. It was just the seed was planted.
Yeah. And
You
so
know?
when you left Minnesota, where did you go?
When I left Minnesota, I basically, you know, I wanted to be an Olympiad. I decided I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a dentist.
What were you going to do in the Olympics?
Run.
Oh.
Run. So I went to Kenya to train.
You did?
Yeah, I met up with the legendary Kenyan runner, Henry Rono.
Oh, so you trained with him?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Henry in Portland, Oregon, of
Oh.
all places. And he tells me, if you want to be a good runner, go to Kenya.
Oh.
So there I packed my bag from Portland, Oregon, and I go to Kenya.
Wow.
And I was in Kenya training with all the elite runners that have won the
Wow.
Boston Marathon,
Yeah.
you know, the Hawaiian Marathon, the New York Marathon.
And there you were training?
Training with them.
Was
you
it
know.
tough?
Oh, it was great.
It wasn't
I
tough?
was overweight, and I started drinking over there, the local brew.
Did they drink?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
The runners
Kenyans,
drank?
Kenyans can drink. They can drink. They would stay up all night. Honestly, with all due respect, they would stay up all night and drink and run the next day and set a world-class record. And I couldn't, up to this day, I can't phantom that kind of gift.
My mouth is hanging open.
You know?
That's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
It is a gift.
Richard Chilimo.
It's within them, right?
Yeah, it's in their blood. Richard Chilimo.
Oh, right.
I mean,
He was.
Yeah, I've been to places in Kenya. Most Kenyans would tell me they've never been in their life, in their own country.
And you went with those people that you
and
were
they took
training
me
with?
to the mountains and left me there, and I was overweight. I was this young kid.
So how did that influence your work?
Well, I was
I
just,
think all of it's
I was
influenced.
gathering. I was just gathering. I was
Right.
in search on this
Right.
path. I was confused.
Right.
But I was, you know, it was very romantic for me. It was like this romantic thing that I wanted to do.
Well, you were lucky that you were able to do it.
Yeah,
To moving
exactly,
around. And
exactly.
then when you settled down, you have settled down to be an artist now.
Yeah. Well, what triggered?
Because look at this work that you're doing.
What triggered this and this and this is I went to Sierra Leone in 1993.
Yes.
And there was a civil war. And that's when everybody was getting their limbs chopped off. You know, I woke up, there was a curfew. And then I woke up the next day, the street was full with blood where you witness people being shot,
You did.
being amputated, their head being cut off. And that was something that I never thought, you know, human beings were capable of, and I was awakening to that. And so to witness another human being chopped off a woman's head while she's pregnant, she's about to have a
stop
child.
it.
And that sort of triggered me. And I think that was the turning point in my life. So I came back from Sierra Leone to Minnesota, and I wasn't happy. Then I went to Kenya as an
Yeah,
excuse.
right.
And what came out of that was, I want to see the rest of Africa and why my mother's people are doing what they do to each other.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So Sierra Leone was actually the tipping point, was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent about 6 to 7 years traveling all over Africa. And everywhere I went, you know, I went to Angola, it was a war zone. I went to Zimbabwe, it was unstable. Namibia was stable, but it was
Namibia?
corrupt.
They had just
Yeah.
changed names, Namibia?
Yeah, well, they went from under the South African regime during the apartheid regime
Right.
to Namibia, and but I did it in a very eccentric way, you know, whereby, you know, I show up, I look like this, and leather pants,
And they left you alone?
no, I got into trouble.
Oh, you got into
Yeah,
trouble.
I had a mouth that was very provocateur, You know, I was not afraid to like cuss out somebody, especially if I knew you were a politician, because I would say, "What's your excuse?"
Okay,
You know?
let's get to your
Yes,
art.
please.
Tell me about this piece.
This
Because
piece,
I love this piece. It's a combination of many things.
yes, these are photographs. I got into photographs a long time ago, you know, and this piece was taken on Sunset of this young lady walking on Sunset, and I am thinking, I mean, clearly you can tell. I think she's a street girl, prostitute. And so I took this photograph at 3 o'clock in the morning with a Nikon F5, and she was talking to the cops, smoking a cigarette, or maybe it might have been a sting. So I took the picture, and then I put the picture away. Fast forward, 12 years later, I go back into my archive in my studio in Boyle Heights, and I take the pictures and I put it on the abstract canvas that I've done before, and I put a trash bag over it, and I blow touched it.
So it's
Trash bag.
but it's collaged with the trash bag. It's blow torched.
Yeah. With
So
the
you see
photograph
the
that I took.
painting, you see the burn.
Yeah.
And the photograph then comes after.
Yeah.
Do you do street art at all?
I've never done street art.
Because
you
this
know.
is kind of reminiscent a little bit of street art.
Yes, but I am surrounded by street art in
And
East
you-
LA, all over LA.
I know you're in downtown LA. You said
Exactly.
Boyle Heights, right?
Exactly. Over the bridge.
Over the bridge.
Yeah.
But you're a sculptor as well.
I do conceptual art, political provocateur.
And
you
this is
plunger. I found this at Home Depot, and I was just walking around. I was bored. I needed something to do, and boom, and it's a plunger, just a toilet plunger.
Did you cut?
I took it to the factory.
Oh, and you had it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm aiming at blue chip, you know, all that wonderful things.
So you're doing sculpture and painting at the same time. I
Exactly.
love this.
The flask, lucky find, you know.
Is
And
it a
this-
real flask?
Functional flask, whiskey flask, 44 ounce.
How could it be so big? Show us the big gold one.
88 ounce.
How could it be so big?
And it says America, and it's a political statement also. America, grandeur, land of the plenty, the American dream. Be anything that you want to be in America, you know. And
This big?
Yeah. Well, the American dream.
And
you
give
know?
me the other one.
And
The
then
other one's
this one
great.
deals with, you know, just deals with our troubled society, you know, in times of trouble, debauchery, you know, that fine line.
Have
know?
you used these in shows?
This was in the solo show in Highland Park, you know, a line gallery. And I have a show coming up, actually, which you mentioned, with somebody we have in common, John Mark.
John Mark,
Yeah,
Mark Bradford.
Yeah. John Mark is putting up a show for me in June 9th.
In what area?
Silver Lake, right off the 101.
And what will you be showing?
I'll be showing there. June.
What will you work? What work
it's
will
new
you have?
work. It's going to be, I'm going to enter the market with this heap of trash. And
It's so great. Heap
yeah.
of trash, right? And it
Yes.
looks so beautiful.
Thank you. And it's a contemporary, you know, it's my contemporary take of the madness.
Before we leave, tell me what artists influenced you. I know you
Oh my
have
God,
a
so
long
many.
list of artists.
Romeo Bowden,
I know, he's so
Gorky.
great.
Ashley Gorky,
Gorky, too.
yeah,
Armenian.
yeah. Warhol,
Yeah.
Basquiat,
Old boss.
Larry Bell,
Basquiat. Oh,
you know,
right.
Lee Bantico.
You like Frida Kahlo?
I love Frida Kahlo. All of the Mexican movement. Diego,
Beautiful,
Tamayo,
right? Yeah.
Socorro. In fact, I took a class at LACC with Raul Dalla Soto.
So here we are. You're doing your thing. I'm so glad to
Yes.
meet you.
It's an honor. Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
And thank you for
And it's
being
an
with
honor
us.
to be sitting in the presence of an icon.
Well, it's an honor to have you as an artist with me. Thank you very much,
No,
Sheku.
thank you. You know.
And don't go away. We'll be right back with poet Kita Curry. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles, where we're taping at the Hollywood Museum. And I'm with poet Kita Shantiris Curry, who was born in Washington, D.C., but traveled the world with her family. She had an army life with her father, who graduated from West Point, and Kita settled in Palo Alto for a while, where she went to high school, and she graduated with a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Pennsylvania with a scholarship. and she earned her PhD in psychology at UCLA, and then went on to become the CEO and president of the D.D. Hirsch Community Health Center. She's a prize-winning poet who's married to a musician.
Right.
So you have all this kind of artistic thing in the background and some really heavy-duty stories, I think, right? So Kita,
Definitely.
tell us about the D.D. Hirsch community service first, and then we'll move into
Okay.
what's going on. Where is it?
Its headquarters are in Culver City, which is sort of embedded in Los Angeles, and we serve people from throughout Orange County, even Ventura, and primarily Los Angeles. We serve over 90,000 people a year, kids, adults. We have 100 schools that we're in with therapists. We have residential programs. We also have the first suicide prevention center in the nation, and that service is not just nationwide. We take calls from the national hotline from throughout the U.S., but it's also worldwide. We were the model for
Is
a
it
lot
a
of.
physical building?
It is, yeah. We have 11 sites altogether, but yes, there's
Oh,
a
you
building,
do?
yeah.
And all through California or through LA?
Our actual buildings are in Orange County and Los Angeles County.
And you have many, many employees.
Yes, over 500 now.
And do they come and go, or how do you work that?
Programs that are basic sort of outpatient programs, they tend to work from the morning into the evening so that we can see families who can't get their kids to therapy in the daytime. But the 24-hour programs, which we have 3 residential programs that are 24 hours, and the suicide prevention crisis line, 24
That's 24 hours,
Right, so we
right?
have people coming and going. And
How do you man those phones? Are there a lot of phones, suicide prevention?
there are. We took 70,000 calls and chats last year. So
Really?
we have trained staff, and we also have trained volunteers. Volunteers actually make excellent listeners because they make often better listeners than therapists. I can say that since I'm a psychologist.
You're a therapist, but
Right.
why do they?
Because it's easy to teach them to listen instead of to try to either guide or direct, to just be receptive to what the person has to say. Because if you're thinking of suicide, the first thing you know need is for someone to say, how do you hurt? Where does it hurt? And tell me about that, instead of launching into sort of jumping in to do too much direction.
Don't do this, don't do
Right,
that.
right.
And then, but you can train a volunteer to ask those
Right.
questions rather than someone who's trained who wants to tell you what to do.
Right, and to fix things right away.
I see, right away. But is that the same thing on a lot of those programs? The
Having a lot
do you
of
have a lot of
volunteers?
volunteers?
We have over 200 volunteers for the Suicide Prevention Center. Not just on the line, there are
Wow.
people that have been trained to co-lead groups for people who've lost a loved one to suicide.
Uh-huh.
And they've been trained to go to the scene of a suicide. And, we work with the mayor's crisis response team. And if there's been a suicide and the family is receptive to us coming, we'll go right there at the time.
When a phone call comes in, do those people ever then come in quite physically for therapy? Has that happened?
More so in our Orange County office.
They
but-
actually come in?
Right, but we have, I think now 6 locations, Ventura County, LA County, Orange County, where we do these support groups, either for people who've lost someone to suicide or someone who's attempted suicide. And this attempt group is really sort of, it's internationally a leader. It's the first one to be on this best practices registry.
What makes it that way?
Oh, people
Why do
are
you get that
afraid.
distinction?
People are afraid of working with people who've made suicide attempts. They're afraid.
Is that?
Yeah, I
You mean other therapists or
Yes,
other
yes.
organizations?
Yes. I'm not saying we're the only people that
No,
help
but I
people,
know, but the idea.
Right. I mean, one, it's the fear of the liability if something bad were to happen. But the other
I
thing
see.
is, it's a heavy responsibility, and it's can make your job more of a 24-hour job than a once a week, an hour a week with a person.
Oh, I see.
So-
it's like time constraints and emotional involvement and different situations. Well, I think you got to this point because of your personal story to become a therapist and to continue your education and all that. Tell us what really led up to this point where you are, and then we'll go on to what snakes want.
That's quite a tantalizing lead.
We've got to get you to Dee Dee Hirsch, right?
Well, I come from a family that was sort of fraught with trauma, and my father was an alcoholic who was incredibly abusive when he was.
But very educated and in a very high position.
Right. He made it to colonel in the Army and worked on radar and other kind of high-level things. But I believe now he probably had bipolar disorder because he.
But wasn't diagnosed with that.
Right. Although my mother was concerned about him after World War II and went to speak with people, and they said he needed treatment. I mean, back then we really didn't have very good treatment or understand these things as well as we do. But
when you look back on it, can you see similarities to the kind of people you're treating now from him?
Yes, although I hope most of them don't beat their wives and children.
But I mean, do you see that?
They don't.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they don't.
You can't explain all behavior away by an illness. But you know, he did things like join a yacht club when he didn't even have a boat or any furniture. So those are kind of manic behaviors. And mood disorders run in my family. My grandfather was apparently hospitalized for depression, and I have everybody in my family's been on some kind of medication at one point or another, which is a good thing.
So they were being analyzed and they were being helped. Yeah.
No, not that.
They
not
weren't?
back then. No. I guess my grandfather was, but I don't know if that was by choice or not. But no, when I was a kid, there was no talk about therapy or illnesses. I mean, not that we were that different from most families, but. Things have come a long way.
They have come a long way. Right. I mean, you've recognized the problems, you've gone to school on a scholarship, you've become the head of this great organization, helping people. And another aspect of that is the arts.
Right.
And do you use the arts in healing?
Yes. Lots of therapists do use the arts, whether it's the, painting or collage or writing, and I'm sure it's been healing in different ways for me. The one thing I wanted to say, because it's important, part of Dee Dee Hirsch's mission is to erase stigma, is that it took me, I started going to therapy when I was in my 20s, when I was feeling very suicidal. I actually made a suicide attempt when I was 14, and my mother just said, "Oh, you're just trying to get attention," and swept it under the rug because nobody wanted to talk about things like that back then.
But that's why it's so interesting that you're so involved with the suicide prevention thing, and I see the background all coming to a head here.
Right. Although it wasn't a plan, but I guess these things just naturally evolve.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to be a Chinese major when I went to college, but then I took a year-long course in psychology, and it's just fascinating. I always say it combines poetry and science.
Right.
But
well, that's why I think the arts are so healing, or so many people use the arts as a healing mechanism.
And what I found with this book of poetry that came out is that my life as a poet and a psychologist have converged in a way that I didn't expect or plan, in that because Dee Dee Hirsch's mission is to erase stigma, I talk a lot about my family and the ways in which, by not talking, we were less healthy.
You mean by opening up and having people open up?
We were not healthy.
Right.
When we didn't talk, we weren't healthy.
Right.
We became more healthy by talking, not just because then you might get help and you find out other people have the same, many people have the same issues. But in the poetry, there are many dark poems in my book, although it was really sort of cute. I read up in Santa Cruz, and the woman who introduced me was very young. And after she introduced me as two people, the psychologist and the poet, she said to me, "Your poetry is really spicy." And there is a fair amount of sort of...
It's kind of edgy.
Right, sly humor and sex, and as well as the dark things. But most of us have gone through dark things, and most of us don't talk about it.
But how long did it take you to write it?
Well, that's... I've been an off-again, on-again poet for all my life, I guess. So in graduate school, I started writing again, and I took a leave to write and published and whatnot. And then I was, one of the things I was doing was teaching poetry in the schools, and I realized I didn't want to just help kids talk about their feelings. I wanted to help them do something about it. So I went back to graduate school, and then I got so immersed in my career, I stopped writing. I stopped writing for over 20 years. And so some of
it's
these,
been a big gap.
Right. And so the majority of these poems are from the last 10 years.
So you've been published around the world, you're a prize winner, and are you continuing to write? Because even though there was this gap?
Well, I didn't know this, but other people that have had books come out tell me this is very normal, which makes me feel a lot better. That since I was working on getting the book ready and proofreading, and then working on trying to get it out, known in the world, and do readings, plus my job, which is at least a 60-hour-a-week job, I haven't written anything, but I have been reassured by all my writer friends
That it's okay.
that that's normal, and you will start writing
Because
again.
you've reached this epitome of what the book was, and being published all over, and having What Snakes Want. How'd you get the title?
It's a line in one of my poems, but I had a lot of other titles, Rear View Mirror, and I can't even remember what they were, and none of them quite felt right. And then I was proofreading the book, and I read through and What Snakes Want, and I thought this is the right.
And the cover, where'd you get this photograph? Or is it an art piece?
There was a man named Seba that commissioned people to draw bugs and snakes and all sorts of things.
It's fantastic.
And it's from the 1700s, so it's public domain.
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm going to hold it
Yeah,
up
the
for
detail
the
is
camera
incredible.
to see. Yeah.
I guess it's an etching.
And what does it mean?
You mean, what's the answer?
Yeah, what do snakes want?
Well, I think everybody should read and decide for themselves, because it's sort of like painting. When you look at a painting, you usually can't say what the painting means. You can say what it makes you feel. So I wouldn't want to, because I've had people read a poem I wrote that means one thing to me,
Right.
and what it means to them makes just as much sense.
Well, it makes just as much sense,
Yeah.
because I would say, how does the healing power come? Because if you're writing to have that power come, and it's interpreted a different way.
Well, I honestly couldn't say I write for healing. I think it's healing for people, because for some of the stories are their stories, but they aren't comfortable. Stigma or embarrassment keeps them from talking. And I open the door, and then I've had people talk to me after readings or email me and say, I used to lie in bed and be afraid of my father, or
Same things that you would talk
or
about.
my one person told me her brother had died by suicide. And so I think if you're a writer, the first thing is you just love to write. You have this drive to write. You have this drive. And often when I start a poem, I think I know where I'm going, and I don't end up there. And in fact, sometimes I have to throw away the beginning of the poem, which is always like, oh God, I don't want to let go of it.
All that time involved,
Yeah.
and my feelings and all that. Yeah.
This beautiful line, but it's got to go.
Yeah.
But
Did you take poetry workshops?
not much. I'm not a good workshop person. I don't like to write on demand.
Oh,
No.
So it's all whatever has been coming to you.
It's not. I went
You teach poetry?
I did teach poetry in the schools for about 5 years.
Oh, so
to
you know
kids,
exactly
right.
what the form should be. And
Well, I wouldn't go that far, and I've forgotten a lot of it. I did take a workshop recently with Billy Collins, who's a very well-known poet.
yeah.
And everybody was saying all these words, and I was thinking, oh, yeah, I knew what that meant once. I think I know what that means. But
So that's what you were teaching at one point.
Right.
Well, I read a lot of the poems, because I think you have to read poetry over and over, because things change. And I suggest that people read What Snakes Want. And I thank you for being with us.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me.
And you can go away now. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.